Mr. Raj Joshua Thomas.
Sir, the Tripartite Work Group for the Prevention of Abuse and Harassment of Healthcare Workers was set up in April 2022 to look at how to address the abuse and harassment of healthcare workers. The work group presented its findings and recommendations in March this year. Their findings on the extent of abuse is troubling. More than 2 in 3 healthcare workers had witnessed or experienced abuse or harassment in the past year. A third of all healthcare workers had witnessed or experienced abuse or harassment at least once a week. Healthcare workers are in a particularly vulnerable position. Their job inherently involves interaction with people who are in need of some form of assistance or attention, or who may even be in distress. Many healthcare workers, therefore, internalize that some abuse is to be expected as they carry out their jobs, and this often leads to underreporting. The work group found that frontline healthcare workers like pharmacists, patient service associates, and nurses are more likely to face abuse and harassment, with the most common type of abuse being shouting, making demeaning comments, and threatening to file complaints or to take legal action against the healthcare workers. In other words, many of these forms of abuse and harassment arise out of an expectation that the patient and/or the caregiver should be treated in a certain way, that they may have some entitlements and that they are not getting, or that they should have that they may have some entitlements that they are not getting, or that they should have some level of service or timeliness. This prevalence of abuse against frontline service workers has also been found in other sectors. The critical question, therefore, is why do these abusers have these expectations, and why do they think that they can resort to shouting, making demeaning remarks, or threatening to make complaints? I wonder whether it is precisely because of the fact that our healthcare system is reputed to be one of the best in the world, and whether it has something to do with the quintessential Singaporean aspiration towards efficiency and accountability. Has this now become so ingrained in our people that it has become a basic expectation of all services and all workers in Singapore? Then, when this expectation is not met, Singaporeans become frustrated as they feel that the system has failed them. In this regard, our success at being efficient and productive may have turned out to be a double-edged sword, because even falling slightly short can lead to backlash. One thing that stood out for me in the report was that one of the more prevalent types of abuse was threatening to file complaints or to take legal action against the worker. Again, this appears to be an aberrant, a twisted application of the whistleblowing process and the desire to improve through feedback, as well as the rule of law. Are we becoming more litigious as a society, and is it happening because we believe that any perceived slight or inconvenience can be remedied by litigation, by complaining, or through the courts? All this affects the morale of the healthcare workforce and their ability to carry out their jobs. Just this morning, Dr. Tanya Swam shared with me an anecdote of how one of her friends in healthcare was so affected by threats that she had resigned. This included a threat from an abusive individual who threatened to look for her outside her workplace. And he said in Mandarin, which I shall not try to say verbatim, but the translation of it is, "Singapore is so small, even mouse also can find." This is what I'm told the translation is. When it comes down to our workers on the ground, what they are focused on is getting their job done. Technology and processes have made us faster and better, but there are also sometimes administrative processes that workers have to follow. For example, the Personal Data Protection Act now imposes certain requirements on data collection and processing that are necessary to protect personally identifying information. Another example is that as our population ages, there will be an increasing need to appoint deputies, and there are certain statutory procedures that must be complied with that caregivers may not fully understand. This could lead to frustration with hospital administrators, and tempers could flare. As such, a key plank of the effort to prevent abuse and protect our healthcare workers should be to instill in patients, caregivers, and members of the public that regardless of their frustration with administrative processes or perceived systemic inefficiencies, It is not acceptable to take out these frustrations on workers who are merely working within the system that they find themselves. This goes beyond having mere statutory protections and penalties under the law. It requires that we adopt a societal mindset of civility and kindness instead of imperious expectation and entitlement. In fact, this is what the Honourable Member Mr. Wan Rizal said earlier, that we need to have an all-of-society effort. Japan, for example, has a culture of omotenashi, or selfless hospitality, which is seen as a microcosm of the Japanese mindset to be centered on care rather than expectation. Omotenashi provides that good manners and polite bearing are not just expected in interactions between individuals and in social contexts, but that there are also indications of respectability and good standing. Principles include humility, patience, a quickness to apologize, and an even tone in conversation. To emphasize omotenashi and ensure that this core Japanese characteristic is not lost amidst a modernizing society, the Tokyo municipal government launched the Tokyo Good Manners Project in 2016, which is ongoing. MOH Holdings had already announced that it would be launching a national public education campaign to promote positive relationships of trust and respect between healthcare workers, patients, and their caregivers. I truly hope that this campaign will be successful in reducing incidents of abuse, giving societal support to our healthcare workers, and building our very own omotenashi. Abuse of healthcare workers comes generally from two categories of individuals: patients and caregivers or family members of patients. As regards patients, healthcare professionals may find themselves in a conundrum. Patients who are elderly, have mental health issues, or who are in pain may sometimes turn abusive, including physically abusive. In this regard, one of the work group's recommendations was to stipulate clear consequences for perpetrators. For patients who are abusive, warnings may be issued and they may be discharged if they do not require urgent attention. Further to this, healthcare workers may also disengage from abusive patients by refusing unreasonable requests. I imagine that it will be challenging drafting the guidelines for this, as it would have to balance the need to provide medical care to patients while at the same time protecting healthcare workers from physical, mental, and emotional abuse. Likewise, for caregivers and family members who may be distraught due to a medical emergency or condition of a loved one, there may also be instances where they turn abusive. My view is that while we can be sympathetic to family members in such situations, there should be zero tolerance if they turn verbally or physically abusive or harass healthcare workers. While it is part of a healthcare worker's role to provide support to these people, there is no overriding obligation of providing medical care to them. As such, the procedures to deal with abusive non-patients should be far stricter than those for abusive patients and should be actively enforced. Supervisors and hospital management must stand by their workers, and our national healthcare groups have already said that they will support and implement the recommendations, including a zero-tolerance policy. I was also heartened that Minister Ong has said that even the minister will have their back and that healthcare workers should know this. Authorities should also be prepared to prosecute such cases of abuse if they are beyond a certain threshold of severity. I hope that the guidelines that will be issued in the second half of this year will see a sharp reduction in incidents of abuse against our healthcare workers, and that it will give them peace of mind as they go to work every day. So I support the motion raised by my fellow nominated members. I would also like to take this opportunity to support our healthcare workers and to thank them for all of the sacrifices that they have made and continue to make every day. Our nurses, doctors, therapists, AMAs, counselors, pharmacists, and administrators are in vocations that protect what is central to humankind: life and well-being. Theirs are not merely noble professions, but the noblest of all professions. Let us therefore ensure that we do our very best to take care of them, that we take care of those who take care of us. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir.